China is one of the most powerful countries of the world. But can you imagine that only 40 years ago, the poverty rate of this country was over 90%. Poverty and starvation has made the country miserable. But in the next 30 years, we saw such a huge transformation that the poor, starving country reached thus far. In 1978, China's contribution to the global GDP was only 3%, and today China contributes more than 18% to the global GDP. The poverty rate is less than 1%, and China is the second largest economy in the world just after US. In many ways, it can be considered as a superpower country. But how was this possible? How can a country that literally starved to death 30 years ago can become a superpower in the 21st century? Let us debunk the success of China in today's video. Things started to work out for the Chinese from 1976. A new leader came to power after Mao's death in China. For those who don't know, Mao was the first leader of the Chinese Communist Party, and his policies have greatly proved to be wrong in most of the cases, other than the policy of education. Succeeding Mao in 1976, Deng Xiaoping was made the president of the Chinese Communist Party. He is also called the father of the modern China because during his leadership, the real transformation of China began. Deng Xiaoping was one of those who raised his voice against Mao during Mao's time. Because of this, during the Cultural Revolution, he was forced to resign from all his positions. It was obvious that Xiaoping's ideology was very different from Mao's ideology. Deng believed that the government has extreme tight control over the Chinese economy, which was the cause of the destruction of China. Over the preceding 50 years, he wanted to free the economy. That's why he introduced his policies of economic liberalization. There were many aspects to this, which we will discuss one by one. But his overall ideology is today known as socialism with Chinese characteristics. When Mao launched his Great Leap Forward campaign, it was a campaign in which the private farming was completely abolished. No individual was allowed to own land, and all the ownership was in the hand of the government at the local level. Deng did not change this ownership system, that is, the ownership remains in the hands of the government of the villagers, but individual farmers and their families were given their land on a long term leash. Those farmers will have the right to decide which crops to grow, how to manage the business, where they can sell to earn profit. All in one, the farmer gets more freedom to grow the crop of their choosing. And second, Deng said that all the farmers will have to sell a certain amount of crop to the government. But after meeting the quota, they can sell the excess product wherever they want and earn extra profit. So this motivated the farmers to innovate. Their productivity increased. Deng used the same idea for factories. Factory manager responsibility system was introduced. Before this, during Mao's leadership, the responsibility to manage the industrial factories in China were given to the member of the Communist Party. There was a lot of political interference, but under Deng's leadership, the responsibility shifted to the workers and managers working in the factories. They allowed them more freedom to decide what they want to produce, their production target, the price at which they want to sell the product, and the salaries they will give their employees. Once again, the workers working in the factory got an initiative to work harder, that it was their factory and they could make it successful if they want to. During Mao's leadership, there was a lot of centralized planning, that is a person sitting on top dictating everything about how everything should remain, how things should work. But during the time of Deng, there was decentralization on many aspects. More freedom was given in the economic sense. Because of these policies measures, millions of people started coming out of poverty, and people life started changing between 1978 and 1984. On average, agricultural output in China increased at the rate of 7.4%. The gain produced in China doubled between the late 1970s and mid 1980s. The next big leap was to bring about a revolution in education, to focus on educating people. Because of this, in 1986, a compulsory education was introduced by the government. For up to 9 years, free and compulsory education will be given to all the children in China. And there was no standstill after the law was passed. The government started spending money on people's education consistently. In 1980s, the money spent by the government on education was approximately 2% of the entire GDP of China, and it kept on increasing. By 2010, it increased and reached up to 4.1% of the total GDP of China. Because of all these measures, we saw an amazing improvement in the literacy rate in China. In 1982, it was at 65%, but in 2012, it crossed 95%. The next development strategy of Deng Xiaoping's was Township and Village Enterprise, also known as TVE. The ownership of TVE were held by township and villages. Both have the same purpose, to bring economic growth in the rural areas and to improve people living standards. TVE have been seen in almost every sector in China: textile, electronic manufacturing, services. In fact, a big example of TVE is Huawei Technology. This company started as a TVE in the area of Shenzhen. Today, it has become a global leader in telecom equipment making. Another good example of this is the city of Wenzhou. There are some local people established small factories to make shoes. Slowly, it expanded and became so big that today the shoes industry of Wenzhou is major exporter in China. The shoes made here are not only sold in China but also outside China. By early 1990s, DV was employing around 100 million people in China. People living standards started increasing. Usually there is an income gap in rural and urban area, but thanks to the TVEs, this income gap started reducing. About 20% of Chinese total industrial input was coming from TVEs in 1990s. Millions of jobs was created because of this, but it could only happen when people were already educated and skilled to do this. In 1980, Deng set up a special economic zone in China, in which top initiative was given. The bureaucratic process was made easier. Few regulations was imposed so that the foreign investment could flow into the country. Many people, when they say the story of China's success and how they become the global economic zone and how it developed into such a big economy, they've put this point first, but I have put this point last, because to reach up to this point you have to make all of the other step possible. That is to bring in foreign investment successfully. When foreign companies set up in your country, they need skilled people. If the people are not educated and skilled, no one will invest money. Another major advantage of China was labor was cheap, people were skilled, only a little bureaucracy, and people already had the experience required because of the TVE. Shenzhen became the first special economic zone in China. This city used to be a small fishing village, but in few years it became a major industrial hub. In 1980, Shenzhen's GDP was approximately $0.3 billion, and by 2020 it reached up to $420 billion. To encourage foreign companies to come to the country, an open door policy was introduced. That is, China's economy was open to the world, and this is also a step to China's economic liberalization. Because of this, many multinational companies like Nike, Apple, Volkswagen set up the manufacturing factories in China itself. In 1980s, China's FDI was approximately $0.06 billion, but in 2021 it exceeded $333 billion. Apart from all of this, the government also focused on infrastructure development. Railway lines were built, good public transport in the cities were also built. Along with this, the government made scientific research a priority and they introduced a crash training program for more than 800,000 Chinese researchers. Priority areas were made in energy production, computer, optics, space technologies, physics, and genetics. The science research centers were given heavy funding by the government. The money spent on research and development was gradually increased by the government, and by 2020 it crossed approximately $500 billion dollars. A big example of this is Zhonghom Science Park in Beijing in 1988. It was a hub of technology and innovation. Many high-tech companies, research institutions and universities are situated here. In 1990, the China has a GDP per capita of just $318, but the change was so remarkable that today China GDP per capita is approximately $12,720. With regard to these revolutionary policies, Deng Xiaoping said that he took the approach of crossing the river by feeling the stones. It teaches us that we can cross the river by evaluating each and every stone. Each and every decision that was taken in a pragmatic and practical manner after a lot of thought. It is not like a dictator with abrupt policies of what could be done to change the country without any further thought or consultation with advisors. We learn from Deng Xiaoping that to bring reforms is a gradual process and that should be undertaken after a thorough evolution, and it should be tested at every step, and policies should be adjusted as needed. And with that, China has become the second largest economy in the whole world and also a close to superpower country.